You're listening to Change Your POV Podcast, episode 184.
Are you set up to be able, when you get out the door, you can relax and go, I'm going to go try this, whether it's volunteering, whether it's a whole career change, whether it is something that you have of your skill set and you want to apply it a different way, whatever that may be, are you setting yourself up for that? It's a thinking book, it's really to get you ahead of transition.
Change Your POV Podcast is dedicated to helping veterans become just as successful out of uniform as we were when we were in. In order to do this, you will need help. We are blessed to have so many individuals willing to share their experiences and stories of others in an effort to bring as much help and value to the transitioning veterans as possible. This week, Bennett and I sit down with such a person, Donna Hoffmeyer, as she discusses her newly released book, Warrior to Patriot Citizen. Donna is an 18-year U.S. Air Force nurse with a career that spans 12 years active duty, 2 years reserves, and 4 years as AGR. Her background includes labor and delivery, flight nurse, nurse manager, college instructor, and readiness officer. Currently, she is a Regional MEDCON Program certified case manager. She separated from active duty in 2006 and went to reserves in 2010. Over the years, she has seen how stressful transition is for service members. She truly believes with planning and the right resources, transition can and should be more exciting and less stressful. Please help me in welcoming Donna Hoffmeyer. Hello, folks, and welcome to Change Your POV Podcast. I am your host, Eddie Lazary.
And I'm Bennett Tanton.
And today we are on the phone with Donna Hoffmeyer, and I'm going to let her get into a little bit of the specifics of what it is that she does. But I will say that her book that we're going to be talking about tonight actually released yesterday, June 1st. So you'll want to make sure to head over to the show notes page for this episode at changeyourpov.com/episode 184 to pick up a copy of that book. It's very, very cool. I received an advanced copy of it, and I've had an opportunity to go through a good bit of it. However, I got the kind with the very fancy watermark across it, which makes it very a little more challenging to kind of consume. But nonetheless, it was great information in there, and I don't want to spoil anything. But welcome to the show, Donna. How are you?
Good. I'm good. Sorry about the watermark.
Oh no, I totally understand. Because I was about to go in there and change all of your names to my name. And then throw that thing up on the market and sell it myself. No, I'm just kidding. So give us a brief background of kind of, before we get into the book, kind of who are you? And if you want to talk about the co-author of the book as well, by all means.
Yeah, absolutely. So who am I? That's a good question. Who am I? So, I am in the military, and I've been in for 18 years. I'm an Air Force nurse. And actually have had a transition in my life once. I got out for a brief period. I was in for 12 years active, then decided it was time to take a break, and I separated and honestly didn't quite have the intention of going back, but I did. And the transition itself was interesting for me. I had lots of game plans, and I was moving forward. So that wasn't too hard. But what I found was I found the military was still attached to kind of the back of my pants. I kept finding myself wanting to keep in contact with my military friends and what was going on with the military. And I found myself comparing my civilian job to, well, we wouldn't do that in the military. So although I think I had a decently easy transition, I think I still mourned some of that. And I don't think I realized it at the time. So, here I am back in. I'm actually an AGR, which means I'm like a reservist on active orders. And I have about 3.5 years left. And in my most recent job, I've done a lot of jobs. I've been a labor and delivery nurse. I've been a flight nurse. I have been a nurse manager. I've been a readiness officer. So I feel like I'm kind of the jack of all trades in the military. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, let's go back really quick. You talk about doing 12 years active, getting out, and then kind of flipping around and going back in. Now, Bennett also kind of has a similar story in that he got out of the Marine Corps and then went back into the Army. And that's very, very common with a lot of folks getting out of the military and then saying, as a matter of fact, I don't know, Bennett, if I've ever told you this story, but it was before I took the job as a corrections officer. My business, I owned my own landscaping business, and it flopped, it failed. And you can hear about that on episode 28, Epic Fail, and one of our earlier shows. Anyway,
one of the funniest though.
Yeah, one of our most downloaded shows. Everybody likes to hear a good failure story, but that's right. That's mine. And I found myself I found myself at the recruiter station. I went in and I was like, I need to get back in. And I talked to my wife. I was like, I just don't know what else to do. Because in the military, things made sense to me. I knew where I stood with things. I knew, the pecking order. I knew what I needed to do to get promoted to the next rank. I knew what I needed to do to get ready to go to the field. I knew what I needed to know to help my soldiers get promoted. I mean, I felt like I had a handle on things, and I got out and I lost all of that. I just felt lost. I mean, and the thing about it is, a lot of people get out and they stay relatively close to a military installation or somewhere near a military installation. I moved so far away that the only time I saw anybody in uniform was on, cheesy movies on Netflix. I mean, that was the closest to anything military I got. And I just felt completely disconnected. And I went back in. I actually retook my ASVAB test. I mean, I was going through the motions. I was going back in. And that's when I decided, well, while I'm waiting for all this paperwork to go through, I'm going to need to make some money somehow. So I threw my hat in the ring and applied to become a state trooper as well as a corrections officer. And I said, whichever one offers me the job first, that's what I'll do. And it turns out it was corrections officer. So that's what I did. And I was literally just a stone's throw away from entering the military again. And a lot of people find themselves getting back in. So I want to explore that a little bit, Donna, with you. 12 years active, you get out. How long were you out before you decided to kind of go back?
4, actually. And honestly, I was out because my last job was so stressful to me, and I promised myself that when I stop having fun, I'm done. And I did, and people were shocked. I actually had a line number to my next rank. I was like, nobody gets out at 12 years when you're getting ready to be promoted. And I walked out, and I was like, yeah, nope. And so people were jaw dropped, but I was having like physical symptoms. Like I was having blurred vision and headaches, and wake up in the morning, I'd be near tears knowing I had to go back into work. And I was like, this is not the way it's supposed to be.
Not good at all.
No. So my life kind of merged up. I was finishing a master's, and I had to do a 450-hour internship. I couldn't do that in the military, not in my job. So between that and the stars just kind of lined up, I left. I was like, I'll finish this. This is what I'm going to do. I had a game plan to finish my master's degree. I'd work civilian nurse, and that's exactly what I did. I actually also did personal training because I was certified as a trainer, so I did some of that on the side. I was getting a master's in sports science. And once I got my master's, again, some of the stars just lined up, and somebody offered me a job to teach college. I'm like, sure. So I started teaching college in kinesiology department. Absolutely loved it. And then my husband got orders to San Antonio, and I was like, crap, here we go. So when we moved down here, I had to figure out what to do. We had a 2.5-year-old son, and as much as I love my child, me being a full-time stay-at-home mom, which I respect every single one of them highly, I was going stir crazy. So I said, what am I going to do? And there was that reserves down there. So I put my name in the hat, and one of the units picked me up, and I did 2 years in reserves. And I have a lot of respect for them because I was so lost in that world. Very different than active duty. Did a lot, though. I did a lot of things during my reserve time and learned a ton and loved it. But it kind of get to a point where that was dwindling, and I knew it was time to leave for various amounts of reasons. And in the meantime, I had thrown my name in a hat for this AGR job to be a clinical case manager. Didn't know anything about it, but I thought, one, it's closer to my house by like 45 minutes. And I don't have to do this big commute anymore. So I said, well, why not? It's more focused. And I got the job. And that was 2013. I walked in the door to a brand new division. Like, division never existed. We were walking in the door and they're saying, you're doing this. And we're like, okay. And yeah, I've been there for the last 4 years. And it's been another amazing learning experience because we watched something that went from conceptual to nebulous to it's still forming. I mean, it's much firmer now, but we're still ever growing and changing. And that's where I started seeing all this transition stuff go on. We weren't directly involved with it, but the people that we took care of, so many of them were going out on medical evaluation boards. They were getting MEB'd out. And I'm listening to them. And I'm, it's me and a phone and a computer. So we take care of people over the U.S. and I'm listening to them and I hear how stressed they are and I hear their anxiety. And I have to sometimes be the one to say, hey, I don't think your condition's going to resolve enough. I think you're going to have to go through a board. And to hear their responses to it and trying to get them the resources. It wasn't really our job directly, but we at least got them in the direction. And we worked with the Wounded Warrior program that's, within the Air Force and getting them out to the different, entities that help them transition. And it was good, but there was still something missing. I couldn't even explain it to you. I just, in the back of my head, I was always like, God, we can do better than this. That's always what was the thought in my head. But it was nothing more than that. It was nothing more than a thought. Just, I know we can do this better. I just have no idea how. And then completely happenstance random. I'm on Facebook reading a comm thread from a friend of mine that I knew in college. I mean, like back in Maine, and one of her friends, who happens to be now the co-author, made a comment about service members need to find a new mission. That is why they have a hard time. They have to figure out their new mission. And it resonated with me. And I typed back, yes, that's exactly right. And for whatever reason, he's like, call me. And I'm like, what? And so he did. He called me. We talked. And I am not kidding you. I found out he was an author. And I said, Kevin, forget all those other things you're thinking about writing. Write this book. You need to write something about transitioning and them finding their new mission and their new adventure and all that. And he's like, okay, write it with me. And I said, excuse me? I said, I've written lots of things, but they all have to do with college and like nerdy things. And he's like, no, write it with me. And by midnight, he had an outline and he had the name of the book. This is the original name of the book. We never changed it.
Oh, wow.
And he had and that's 2.5 years ago. And he had an outline and I walked upstairs. I remember it was about midnight. I looked at my husband and I'm like, hey, I'm going to write a book. And he's like, excuse me? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to write a book. And boom, there it was, where I was writing a book. And again, it was just another amazing learning process. And then one day the book was done.
Wow.
And ironically, the editor that we have, it said everything kept lining up. It was really odd. A case manager that I was working with in Washington State was making a comment about writing. And I said, I'm working on a little book and just general conversation. And she's like, oh, really? She's like, yeah. She goes, oh, my editor is in San Antonio. His name is Floyd Lugent. And I went, oh. She's like, you should talk to him. Well, Floyd's our editor now.
Oh, wow.
So, it's like this book, just the universe was like, write it. I feel like it was kind of Field of Dream-esque, right. Just do it and it'll come, and I'm like, okay. And so it got to the point where Kevin, he had some things going on in his life. It got really, really busy. And we were trying to finish the book. And he's like, I'm really sorry. This is happening. That's happening. And I said, okay. I said, look, we're never going to finish this. Let me take the lead. Cause he was the skilled author. Like he is he's done this. Right. And I just thought, here, I'll put words on paper and then you do all that other stuff. Like, cause I don't know about it.
Right.
And I said, I'll do it. I'll bring it home. And he's like, okie doke. And the next thing I know, I'm looking and I'm like, okay, so I've got to figure out how to self-publish and I've got to do this and that. And yet again, not that Kevin wasn't there to help, but I mean, he really had to do things in his life and I didn't need to keep bothering him. I happened to be talking to my neighbor and I mentioned some random comment, and the guy's been our neighbor for like 8-9 months. And I never mentioned about writing a book. And I made this one comment and he's like, oh, really? He's like, I've helped some people with publishing books. And come to find out, he actually used to he had a small publishing business. And he didn't have it anymore, but he literally helped me bring it home. That's what I'm saying. It was just so happenstance. And so I'm like, okay, well, this is what we're doing. He's like, oh yeah, I know this. I know how to do that. Here, this is the things you need. This is how you copyright. This is this is that. And I'm like, okay. And literally that's how I did it. And like, I went to go do
Ain't nothing to it but to do it, right?
Yeah. Some of the things I totally took a random chance, like the book cover. The book cover I actually developed myself. I literally in one night I was on canvas and I was like, oh, that looks kind of cool. But I needed it done pretty,
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know what I'm doing. And then somebody mentions one of the online entities that you can go to. And so I get on one of them, I think it was Fiverr, and I look on and I was like, okay, wow, they'll do stuff for like 10, 20, 30 bucks. Okay. So I picked one. I triaged it down in my head how I need to pick somebody, and I picked them. And 2.5 weeks later, developed a book for whopping $42. So
that's
there you
amazing.
go.
That's actually where I found Bennett on Fiverr.
Isn't that?
No, I'm kidding.
Serious?
No, I'm kidding.
Almost.
Almost.
Not
Yeah.
that much different.
So
I don't want to ask what he was offering.
You don't want to know.
The co-author, Kevin.
Yes.
Cullis,
so
right?
Yeah. So Kevin he's very funny. So Kevin was in the military a long time ago. I will not dime you out, Kevin, how long ago, but it was a long time ago. And
there's pictures of him out there.
Back when Eisenhower was in his chain of command, or not quite?
Might have been. So maybe in that vicinity, yeah.
Okay.
You might have some direct quotes.
And he was aiming high too, right?
He was aiming high, yes. Chair Force and all, yes. Aiming high. So he was an aircraft maintenance guy. And he decides, this is cool and all, but I want to do other stuff. And so he gets out and he goes to college and he does, of course I can't, ROTC in college. And then he comes back as an officer and he ended up doing a total of like 10 years. And he decides he had a very entrepreneurial spirit and he says, I'm going to go try some other stuff. So he got out. He worked for Apple. And I'm sorry. Yes, I think Apple. And he was selling MacBooks. Yes, he was one of the salesmen for Apple. And then I think there was some restructuring. Now, I might have this wrong, so hopefully maybe you can interview Kevin at another time. But he ended up leaving Apple, and I think there was some restructuring. I don't know if there was layoffs, but he ends up leaving Apple. And he decides, he always liked to write, and he was going to do it. And so he did. He started writing. And so he has 2 books out. And How to Start a Business with Mac. And then he did another very, very niche one, How Would Jesus Do Business? And he basically went through the Bible and pulled out all the business biblical quotes and related and determined how much money it was back then to what it is now and their different skills, and wrote a whole book on it.
Wow. Well, one thing's for sure, we can learn a lot from Jesus about branding, because he's definitely nailed that market for sure.
Very well, very well.
I want to get into some questions here about your book. Now, the book, we haven't even said what it is yet. The book title is Warrior to Patriot Citizen, which I love the title of the book, and I'm amazed that that was the original title, and it hasn't changed, because a lot of authors that we talk to, books go through different evolutions, you know what I mean, from not just in titles, but in images, and, even authors may change somewhere through there. And so it's really, really cool that that's the name that you picked going into this, and it still is the name of it. And I'm going to get into a little bit harder questions here, because I'm in the space where we deal with and we talk with a lot of people that are in the helping veterans with their transition out of the military. And this is something that Bennett and I were actually talking about on my way home from work today. I called him up and I was like, I cannot believe how many resources there are from, VSOs, veteran service organizations, nonprofits, to courses, both in person and online, and books that are available to those that are transitioning. Now, when I got out in 2005, and when Bennett got out, a little bit before that, none of this existed for transitioning veterans. It just didn't.
Very, very little.
Very little.
Right.
And now there's so much. But the thing about it is, and it could be that I just have a disenchanted perspective on this whole thing, but it just seems to me, through everything that we do and people that we talk with, even with all of the resources available out there nowadays, there is still a huge problem with people transitioning successly out of the military. Would you agree?
I hugely agree. And, we were actually talking about this morning in the meeting that we were having, and Steve nailed it, the gentleman I was talking to, and he said, there's so much info out there. You guys went through TAPS, yes, no?
No.
Okay.
They didn't have it when I got out.
It wasn't, they had something, but it was different.
Right.
And it was even worse than it is now. So
yeah. So they have this transition assistant program, and I have gone to a little bit of it because my husband was retiring, so I had to go to parts of it. And it was just at the time I started writing the book. So I walk in, and of course, naturally, I'm like, all right, I want the resources, right? So I'm pulling all this stuff together, and I see some books, transition books, and I'm immediately intimidated. I'm like, oh man, they already got this stuff. What do they need more? So anyways, I came home and I looked at all this stuff, and there's a couple of things I noticed. One, there is so much information.
Mm-hmm.
I still have the stuff from 2.5 years ago because I used it to kind of research. My eyes were just spinning in my head. I consider myself fairly intelligent, semi-organized most of the time, and I wouldn't have even known where to start. I was like, what do you do with this?
Mm-hmm.
You have to the problem is you have to know where you are to know where to go.
Right.
You have to, and that is not an easy task, right? So that's the first thing I noticed. And then the second thing I noticed, this is where I was intimidated because I saw some transition books and I thought, well, if they're, you think they're already there, why am I going to write one? And I opened them up and started looking through it. And it really solidified how we were going to write the book, because all these books were written a lot for senior leadership. Those are retiring, and corporate, how to get headhunters, how to network in the corporate area, how to, your skill set for corporate. And I was like, okay, that's great. So that's, I'm taking a wag to guess how many people are retiring from the military, but maybe 20%, right? Out of that 20% that's retiring, how many people have that corporate skill set? Oh, I bet you that's tiny, 1% maybe.
Yeah.
So they're pushing towards this, and you too can get your dream corporate job. And half of the people aren't even they don't even have the skill set for it. So
or let alone want that.
Or want it. Exactly. After, by the time you get done 20 years, you really just don't want to go back into it's like out of the fire into the frying pan.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked at that and I was like, what about the other 80% that are getting out? What about them? And when you get out, just like you said, Bennett, when you get out, you really want to go back into another office job. Like, you gave everything, right? You gave your time. Some people were deploying and they were the enablers going, every 6 months. You guys in the Army and the Marines, Army, 18 months when they were doing those long deployments.
Yeah, right.
Those were tough, right? And so they gave as much as they could without giving their life, right? Why do they want to get out and start that all over again? Right. So the other part of this book is to set you up. Are you set up to be able, when you get out the door, you can relax and go, I'm going to go try this, whether it's volunteering, whether it's a whole career change, whether it is something that you have of your skill set and you want to apply it a different way, whatever that may be, are you setting yourself up for that? It's a thinking book. It's really to get you ahead of transition.
So let me ask you. Let's go through kind of top.
Sure.
I'll use an Air Force term here. Give me a 30,000-foot view here of the book. What step through kind of the chapters.
Okay.
What's discussed, and what's the takeaways or the value that the reader can glean from this and take away from this book?
Okay, well, so the introduction, the concept that we turned into, and it really didn't develop till, I bet you we were a little over halfway through the book, was kind of reflecting back to look forward. So the beginning of the book, we go back to, and we use George Washington as the example of what it was like that people use their skill set to do other things. George Washington was very entrepreneurial-ish. He was in and out of the military, and Kevin actually wrote that chapter, and they really look at him saying, okay, look, he floated between the two, but he used his military skill sets to enhance his entrepreneurial spirit and his businesses and whatever. So we kind of just give you a very small, gentle, how things looked and why he was like a good example. And then we go into, and then we kind of bring you gently through. So like the second chapter, Civilian to Warrior, we really talk about, hey, here, this is how you developed your skills. Everybody went to basic training or officer training, and what skills were developed. Simple things like, every one of us knows one person failed in the group and the whole team paid the price, right? Mm-hmm. So developing that team concept, developing that helping the weakest link, so to speak, and basically how we move along and start developing these skills. And we kind of point out that the military from the very beginning is teaching you leadership skills, right? Every single one of us has been taught to some level leadership skills, and they put it on you very early. The first time you're a supervisor of one person, you're doing their rating or whatever, mm-hmm. all the way up through. So we kind of get you in that mindset that everybody's being taught skills from the very beginning. And then we get into the third chapter when we're talking about warrior to civilian. So we've gone through like your military and how you've, moved up and developed all these skills. And now we bring you into, okay, now it's time to go the other direction. You're nearing that time for whatever reason, whether it's retirement time, whether it's surprise, you have to go through an MEB, whether it's for some reason you have to separate before you're ready, whatever, or you're choosing to separate. So whatever that is, we're now kind of getting you thinking about it. And one of the things we talk about that I don't think a lot of people talk about is the grieving part. Mm. like I told you, I felt like the military was still attached to the back of my pants somehow. And I kept, keeping in touch with it. And little did I realize I was probably doing my own grieving process, and everybody does it in different ways. And that was one thing with Kevin. He said when he got out, he went through that too, but he didn't know it. And it wasn't until I think it was an interview with Chris Kyle's wife that his wife, Kevin's wife, was watching. And she looked at it and she looked at Kevin and said, "Hey, you went through that. That was your problem." And so nobody identifies. They just, because you get tired and you're like, "I'm out, done."
Yeah.
You're counting down the retirement. You cannot wait. You go. And everybody thinks that's it. I'm good to go. And they don't really identify that they may have some level of grieving.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to let themselves do it, because you don't get to timeline grieving. Some people maybe be like, a couple months, and some people it may be years, and it may be parts of the military that are grieving and other parts they could care less about.
Yeah, it's funny you bring
it was 13 years for me. I almost went back in.
See, I mean, exactly.
Yeah.
13 years. It took, well, I guess it wasn't 13, 11, 12, 10, 11 or 12 really. And I almost went back in again, because I basically had a breakdown in essence. And it was all crap, going back.
Yeah.
It was crazy. Just madness, because I had been distracted for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I did everything in my power to distract myself, and I succeeded. And then as soon as I couldn't anymore, I broke.
And that's the whole point, is understanding. And I don't think anybody ever really has addressed that. Like, you're going to grieve, to just know it.
Well, I got out 12 years ago. I got out in 2005. And just last weekend, all of my two kids, my wife, were all down in the basement, and we're cleaning up, going through things, doing that. We got to get rid of some stuff. And I go over to the corner of the basement, and it's got all my stuff. And I start opening up the plastic totes, and there's all my Army stuff, my uniforms, some old ammo cans, like my map, my protractor, my cup, like,
yeah, bro,
like all of it.
Protractor got me.
Yeah.
It's out of nowhere, like, snatched me up, and I was like, my God, I used to like rule the world with this thing.
Yeah. Right? And I was like, here's the thing. I know deep down inside, I will never use any of that stuff ever again, but I can't. Even right now, I can't get rid of it. I can't get rid of it. And it's very similar, I think, to like parents that lose children, and they go into their room and they just can't bring themselves to, to get rid of the clothes and the bedding, and it's very, very similar.
I think we have to do something with fire involving that stuff.
Well, but it's a good point, because if you do it, meaning if you get rid of it, that means in your mind you're forgetting it,
right?
And you don't want to, because there was good in it.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to hold that, and even that's common among people.
You just totally solved America's hoarding problem.
At least the military hoarding problem. Yeah.
You know what I mean? No, I'm not sure. Yes, it's funny that I said that, but I'm not trying to be a smartass. That's the truth. Is as a society, we've been taught to just hold on to this stuff, and it'll live forever, perpetually, and stuff. You know what I mean?
So like,
and it's just not the way it works.
A week after this show airs live, like every Navy surplus store in America is going to be flooded.
Flooded.
That's right. They're like, get rid of it.
There's going to be no Gore-Tex shortage at all.
Right? Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, it's funny because we went through our closet. We have like one closet has like all our military gear in it. And when my husband retired, we went through all of it. And we pared down like the old BDUs. I have the BDUs, and I have my flight suit, and, I had all these things. And, I'm looking at it, and course, I was like proud that I could still fit in my flight suit. I'm like, that's a success right there. But you're going back through all this.
Winning.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
And so, but what we did is we got rid of all the duplicates, but we kept one of everything. So one set of BDUs. I have one flight suit still. I have, now I have my uniforms I wear now, and I'll probably keep one set of those.
Was that the tiger stripes?
The ABUs, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, baby. Yes.
Love it.
Sage boots. Gotta love it. Sage green.
Oh, I got them. You know it.
My Lord. See, I was an Air Force civilian for a while.
Oh, were you? Good.
But, I worked in for a security forces squadron as a civilian.
We were just about that, Eddie.
Oh my God, it was just nuts. I couldn't. What a different culture. That's all I have to say. I mean, it's not bad. It's just different.
It's hugely different, yeah.
But I really couldn't get over the fact that even enlisted people of higher rank were called sir or ma'am.
You know what? They're not. It's like people do it, though.
They do it. Oh, my God. They all do it. I was like, you got to be kidding me.
I've corrected my husband. Well, so my husband's a retired master sergeant, and totally off subject. Funny story, though. He was at a school. He was auditing a school. So he was like the oldest guy there in the class. And all these classes were like young enlisted, and there were some young officers there. And he was walking down the hall, and this first or second lieutenant bounced the wall for him. He was like, "Excuse me, sir." He's like, "I'm not an officer." The guy's like, "Oh, sorry, sir. I mean,
it's crazy.
Sir, Sergeant, sir." Yeah, very.
Well, I remember the chief of the unit was a civilian. So it's literally like you've got a lot of weird. There was a lot, especially in the cops.
Well,
there's weird stuff going on there.
There's a lot of infused civilian. Yeah, now for the continuity, you are seeing that. You're seeing the civilian people kind of in charge of the area, and then they have a military counterpart there also.
Right. It was definitely weird. It was definitely weird, but I mean, it was still kind of cool, and the chow hall was great.
Mm-hmm.
And the housing was way better.
Oh, that I was going to bring that up because my Army buddies will say to me all the time, they're like, you're like condemned housing is like our officer housing.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
So we may be a lot of things, but we're comfortable.
Amen.
But again, that's kind of changing a little now because all of the housing's getting privatized. So
it is all privatized.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, I remember, well, I lived on Tyndall Air Force Base, which is kind of a dump, just saying.
Yeah.
But that's just because it's old. And then I lived on Dover Air Force Base. And now Dover Air Force Base was pretty sweet. I have to say, I thought it was. The housing was great. Because now as a federal employee, you can live in base housing. It's freaking awesome.
Right.
So yeah. Anyway,
all changes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
You mentioned to me last night when we kind of talked that there was several like interviews, like case studies of folks that you actually talked to.
So,
give me a story of one of these in the book.
Oh boy. Well, so I will give credence to what Chapter 10 is. So Chapter 10 is literally one story of Mitch Durfee. And he was a mechanized infantry Army guy. Came in, I mean, he was family of veterans. He was ready to rock and roll. Came in, and of course, mechanized infantry, their job is deployed. So where was he the first 4 years of his life? Deployed. And so from 18 to 22, I mean, that's all he was. He was gone. And he was like, okay. And in 4 short years, he saw a lot, probably more than other people should see. And he said, okay, I gotta change the game. And he got out. And the story of him, and I don't want to give it all away because I want you guys to read it, but the story of him is how he had an idea of what he wanted to do. He knew he wanted to be an entrepreneur. He just didn't know what he wanted to do. And it shows how he went through the process and how the education he got. It's not exactly what everybody thinks it is, and I'll leave that for the book, but he got some education. He went to other businesses and worked for other businesses and learned different aspects of it, and got some experience. And then him and his buddies, like every weekend, would think up a business to try to start. And they started lots of businesses and lots of failures in there. And then he had a success, and he started Grunts Move Junk in Vermont, Burlington, Vermont. And
what's it called?
Grunts Move Junk.
Grunts Move Junk. I've heard of that.
Yes. So he'll be happy. That's good. They just franchised out to their first franchise. So he started Grunts, and it's just amazing. He brings in veterans. So his buddies that are getting out, they're like, I'm out, but I don't know what to do. And some of them started getting into financial difficulties and whatnot. And he's like, come work for me. And what he does
come learn my business.
Well, it's exactly what he says. He says,
awesome.
Come in and work for me. What do you want to do? So they come in, and of course, like you said, anybody can do junk removal, right? You can go to a house and clear it out. That there's no specific skill set except you need to be
we've all done that type of work. We've all done that type of work, right?
So he says you can bring them on and hire them instantly. And then from there, he's like, what are your goals? And he starts working with them. So like one guy, he wants to do his own marketing business. So he is helping them do marketing. He's helping in like the marketing department, but he started out as just one of the grunts, and then he's learning about marketing, and I think he's going to school. And so he helps them with all this, and he does their job is flexible to be able to handle school or whatever learning they're doing. So he did that, and huge success, right? But amazingly, really wasn't his true passion. His passion was real estate. And he actually made the comment. He's like, when everybody was getting sent like those, Maxim magazines and girly magazines, I had my dad sending me real estate magazines. And he's like, that was my sexy. And so he was learning all about it when he was still in the military. And once he got Grunts moving, he was a real estate agent already. He did become that, got Grunts going, and he started buying real estate. And his goal was to get $1 million in real estate. And I can't remember what time frame, about a year or so. And he just accomplished that. He's actually over that now. And I updated with him, because it took us a long time to do the book from the time I interviewed him. And I said, all right, Mitch, where are you at? And he now is, he does a lot. Like he loves to go to the Tony Robbins things, and he goes out there and listens to him, and he brings the stuff back. And yeah, and he's doing these amazing things now. So he's starting, I think it's $1 startup or something like that, where it is consulting and helping people start businesses. And that's what he likes to do. He likes to help people become successful, and that's where his passion is. So he's giving back to Burlington community. He's helping the veterans. He's got a business started. Well, he's got a couple businesses started. And most recently, he has written a book. And Serve to Win, I believe, is the name of the book. And it's coming out, I don't think it has a set date, but I believe it's in July. And again, how things line up, I am actually going back home, because I am from New Hampshire originally. And
where at?
I'm from Colebrook, New Hampshire, a little tiny town. Population 1,300, and it's were you nearby?
Yeah, I'm in New Hampshire. I actually live over about 10 minutes outside of Hillsborough.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Well, I'll be home in July. So I told him, I said, hey, I'm coming home. Burlington's 3 hours away. I said, let's do a book signing. I said, I'll bring the book over and we can both sign it. And he's like, you know what? I think that's the same time my book is launching. I'm like, good. Then let's do a big book signing. And we're literally working on that right now. As a matter of fact, my best friend from kindergarten, my God, we've known each other forever. she's the one that did the interview for me on Mitch. She's the one that knew Mitch, and she's the one that got me in contact with him.
That's cool.
And she's helping me with some of my PR work. And so we're all trying to set this up now. So,
yeah, let me know when that is. I'd love to come out and
yeah, I
will.
I'll get you involved in it. I did the interview. Well, Jen did the interview. I transcribed the interview. I read it, and I realized this guy is living proof of what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he had ideas, he had plans, he had a direction. He sought out the info, and he was persistent and consistent, and he's just doing amazing things right now. So the rest of the next chapter is, we call them tips and quips. And what I did was I interviewed I interviewed a ton of people, 20, 30 people, and I asked them a series of questions, and I had them fill it out, questionnaire, and I broke it down into categories, and I had people's advice. So the next chapter is all advice, just about different topics. And so we felt that this book, there's no way that we could be successful without having the pros, which were the veterans, in there, because they just validated what we were talking about.
I'm excited for the launch of this book. I'm really excited to share this with all of the listeners of Change Your POV Podcast Network, and really, really excited that you're coming up here, and I want to get a hold of Grunt's Move Junk up there in Burlington, Vermont, and see. And this is really cool that we're gonna.
Yeah, you know what's kind of funny, Eddie, is Burlington is basically halfway between you and I.
Right.
Where are you at?
I'm in Syracuse, New York.
Oh my! It's all my East Coast buddies.
That's right.
Great.
Yeah, that's right.
How awesome! Well, I will definitely be in touch, because we're working it now. And matter of fact, literally at the time we were coming on to this podcast, Jen called me and said, "Hey," and I was like, "I'm going on the podcast," and she's like, "Goodbye." So we're gonna touch base afterwards here. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
we will definitely include you guys.
Where can people find more about you and what you've got going on?
I've become an internet pro. So we have our website, warriortopatriotcitizen.com.
Whoa, what was that again?
The title of the book, warriortopatriotcitizen.com.
Got
right?
it. Okay.
When you get on there, there'll be right on the front, if you want to order the book, you'll be able to push the button. It says, click here on 1 June. You'll be able to order the book. Our email address, same thing, title of the book, Warrior to Patriot Citizen. It's at gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
We're on Facebook, same thing, Warrior to Patriot Citizen. We're on Instagram, and we're on Twitter. And in Twitter, our handle is WTPC Book.
Cool.
We actually made that one shorter. So we're on all of them, and since we've been doing this, I'm blown away at the number of people and the organizations that are there, and they're interested. They're clicking the button and they're looking at us, and we're following them, and it's good. And we're on LinkedIn, but we're doing LinkedIn. I'm doing it under me, just so people can kind of associate the book with somebody.
Right.
So that one's just a little easier to do that way, but you'll see stuff on LinkedIn. So we're trying,
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Donna. Thanks for coming on the show and sharing with listeners of Change Your POV Podcast Network. Thank you again, Bennett, for all your time.
Always.
You sound super sexy tonight, I just have to say.
Hey. I'm trying not to get pneumonia.
All right, folks. Well, never miss an episode. Hit subscribe on your podcast player of choice. You can find all the show notes page for everything that we talked about on this show by heading over to changeyourpov.com/episode 184. Come be a part of our community over at Change Your POV Let me say that again. Come be a part of our community over at Change Your POV Squad Facebook group. We'd love to see you there. All right, folks. Until next time.